The Black Shadow and the Beauty Queen, the last sovereign. The crown was never meant to be heavy, but tonight Ilara felt it crushing her skull. As the newly crowned sovereign of beauty in the secluded mountain province of Oakhaven, Ilara was expected to lead the solstice parade. But Oakhaven held a secret. For every queen chosen, a debt had to be paid to the Black Shadow, an ancient, formless entity that lived in the limestone caverns beneath the village. It began in the dressing room. Ilara looked into the vanity mirror, but her reflection didn't mimic her smile. The reflection's throat was sliced thin, a dark viscous liquid oozing onto her silk gown. When she blinked, it was gone. "Don't look at the corners of the room," whispered Martha, the elderly seamstress. Her hands were shaking as she pinned Ilara's sash. "He is looking for his sovereign." The last one didn't last the night. The descent into horror. The parade never reached the town square. A sudden, unnatural fog swallowed the torches. One by one, the musicians stopped playing. The silence was louder than the music had been. A shadow stretched across the pavement, but there was no person standing there to cast it. A wet, rhythmic dragging noise, like a heavy cloak soaked in blood being pulled over gravel. Ilara looked up. The shadow wasn't on the ground. It was draped over the rooftops like a living tarp of midnight, its eyes two hollow voids of absolute nothingness. The last sovereign. Ilara ran. She retreated into the great hall, the heavy oak doors thudding shut behind her. But the Black Shadow didn't need doors. It seeped through the floorboards like spilled ink. "Why me?" She screamed into the darkness. A voice cold as a winter grave vibrated in her very marrow. "Beauty is fleeting, but the shadow is eternal. I do not want your face, little queen. I want the light behind it." The walls began to bleed. The portraits of former beauty queens, all of whom had disappeared or moved away, began to scream in unison. Ilara realized the terrifying truth. She wasn't a winner. She was a sacrifice. The last sovereign title wasn't an honor. It was an expiration date. As the ink-black tendrils wrapped around her ankles, pulling her toward the cellar, Ilara grabbed a heavy silver torch. The light flickered, dying. The shadow hated the light, but it loved the fear, the cliffhanger. Just as the darkness reached her throat, Ilara felt a cold, metallic realization. The crown on her head. It wasn't gold. It was the key to the cellar's seal. To survive, she wouldn't just have to fight the shadow. She would have to become its master. The night humanity refused to die. The message didn't come with sound. It came with silence. Every screen on Earth, phones, TVs, satellites, froze at the exact same moment. No glitches, no warnings, just stillness. Then the words appeared. "You have been measured." At first people laughed. A hack, a prank, another conspiracy. Until the sky cracked. Not exploded, cracked. Like glass. From those fractures something began to descend. Not ships. Not creatures. Something worse. Shadows. They weren't solid. They weren't light. They moved like smoke but felt. Aware, watching, waiting. Within hours, entire cities went dark. Not power outages. People. Gone. No bodies, no screams. Just empty streets and abandoned homes, as if humanity had been erased mid-breath. In a small forgotten town, far from the world's attention, lived a woman named Ilara. She wasn't special. No soldier. No scientist. Just someone who had already lost everything long before the sky broke. When the shadows came, the town didn't panic. They froze, watched, prayed. But Ilara stepped outside. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing against her mind. Then one of them appeared in front of her. A shadow, tall, twisted, shifting constantly. And then it spoke. Not with a voice. Inside her head. "Humans are weak." Her body trembled. Her heart pounded. But she didn't run. Because she had felt fear before. Real fear. The kind that doesn't come from monsters, but from loss. She whispered, barely able to breathe. "Then why are we still here?" The shadow paused. Its form flickered. "You suffer, you break." Memories flooded her mind, forced, invasive. War, famine, people crying over graves, children screaming in burning cities. Her knees buckled. Tears streamed down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "We do." Her voice shook, but didn't break. "We lose everything." Again and again. The shadow grew darker, stronger, feeding on the pain. then you are unworthy. And that's when something changed. Alara looked up, not with fear, but with defiance. But we don't stay down. The shadow hesitated. For the first time, it didn't understand. She stood, legs shaking but unyielding. We fight, even when we know we'll lose. Her voice grew louder. We love, even when it destroys us. The air around them began to vibrate. And we get back up, even when there's nothing left. All across the world, something strange began to happen. People who had been hiding stepped outside. People who had lost hope started moving, not running, not screaming, standing, facing the shadows. The entity in front of Alara pulsed violently. This is illogical. Maybe, she said, but it's human. Then, the shadow attacked. It surged forward, consuming everything in its path. Darkness swallowed the street, the sky, the world. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a sound, a heartbeat. Not one, millions. The darkness cracked. Just like the sky had, light burst through, not from the sun, but from people. From every human who refused to give up. From every person who stood even when they were afraid. The shadows recoiled, screamed. For the first time, they felt something they had never known. Fear. Alara stood at the center of it all, burning with a quiet, unstoppable strength. You measured us wrong, she said. The shadows began to retreat, dissolving into nothing. The cracks in the sky sealed. The silence lifted. And for the first time since it began, the world breathed again. Days later, scientists tried to explain it. Governments tried to control it. No one could. Because what saved humanity wasn't technology, wasn't power. It was something far more dangerous. Something no alien could ever understand. The refusal to give up, and somewhere far beyond the stars, something was watching again. But this time, it wasn't measuring. It was afraid. Shadows over Earth. The sky had gone silent. Not the quiet after a storm, but the unnatural hush of something watching. No birds, no winds, no distant hum of cities. Just silence. People laughed at the first warnings. Aliens? Come on, that's sci-fi nonsense, they said. But then the sky cracked. Not a fiery explosion, but a jagged fracture that split the heavens. From it, shadows poured, not creatures, not ships, but dark, shifting forms that moved with intent, slipping between light and matter, infecting machines, warping reality. In the first hours, the world fell into chaos. Cities became tombs. Communications failed. Power grids flickered and died. Those brave enough to venture outside saw their neighbors vanish, snatched into the shadows without a sound. Horror spread faster than fear itself. Among the terrified masses, a few refused to give in. Scientists, soldiers, teachers, and children banded together. They learned quickly that the shadows were not mindless. They studied human fear, feeding on panic, thriving on despair. Only courage and clarity of thought seemed to weaken them. Margaret, a 53-year-old schoolteacher, became a beacon. She organized the survivors, turning abandoned schools and underground stations into safe havens. She taught them strategies not just for survival, but for fighting back. Every time a shadow attacked, the humans fought not with guns alone, but with unity, wit, and sheer determination. Days became weeks. The shadowed areas were worse than nightmares. Entire cities seemed alive, twisting to trap the living. But humanity adapted. Engineers rigged devices that emitted light and sound frequencies the shadows couldn't bear. Soldiers used these as lures, driving the shadows into containment zones. In one pivotal encounter, a squad trapped deep in New York's ruins faced a massive shadow that had swallowed half their city block. Panic surged, but a young boy, no older than 14, remembered a pattern from Margaret's lessons. Using mirrors and emergency lights, they disoriented the shadow, forcing it back through the fracture. The humans cheered, not for victory over death, but for mastery over fear. Months passed. The fractures in the sky began to heal as humans reclaimed more cities. Every battle left scars, but each victory proved that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was resolve. Communities rebuilt, stronger and more united, learning to adapt, innovate, and inspire one another. Finally, the last fracture sealed. The shadows vanished, not with a bang, but because humans refused to bow. Margaret stood before the survivors in the city's central square. now alive with light and hope. "We faced the impossible," she said. "We've stared into fear itself, and we are still here, not because we were stronger, but because we refused to surrender. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity endures, and humanity wins." The crowd erupted not in fear but in joy and pride and unity. Against horror, against shadow, against despair itself, they had survived. They had won. And that is the essence of humanity, to rise again and again from the edge of darkness unbroken.